The X-M5 is only the second camera from Fuji to include the film simulation dial, and so people are still getting used to it. There seems to be a bit of confusion as to how it works, especially when it comes to integration with custom film recipes. Today I'm hoping to clear some of that up for you so you have a full understanding of a few important concepts. Those concepts are the difference between a film simulation and a custom film recipe, what the film simulation dial does and does not do, how to program the film simulation dial FS1 through FS3 settings, where you can find custom film recipes to install on your camera, and finally, how to install and utilize those custom film recipes on your Fuji X-M5 or similar camera. This video is split up into chapters that align with each of these concepts, so feel free to save your time and skip around to the information you're looking for. I'm not looking to waste your time and make you watch this entire video start to finish. So diving right into film simulations versus custom film recipes, the difference is that a film simulation is a preset color profile built into your Fujifilm camera from the factory. These profiles are inspired by classic Fujifilm stocks like Velvia, Astia, Provia, Acros, and so on. And they adjust color, contrast, and tonality to emulate the look of traditional film, though Fuji doesn't share exactly how they do this, and you can't really change them. A custom film recipe, on the other hand, is a personalized set of adjustments that you make over and on top of that base film simulation. So a custom film recipe would include tweaks to settings like white balance, highlights, shadows, color, and more to achieve a unique look. These recipes mimic specific aesthetics, often inspired by other film stocks or creative visions. So in short, film simulations are starting points provided from the factory, while custom film recipes are your creative adaptations of those starting points, where you try to map your style preference or creative vision. So the film simulation dial on the left side of the camera here allows you to select between any of the 20 factory installed film simulations on the X-M5. 8 of those are permanently written or installed on the dial here. And then there are 3 custom settings, FS1 through FS3, where you can store your additional favorites. But there's a lot of confusion here because some people think that you can use those slots to store custom film recipes, and that is not the case. They only store factory film simulations. There's also the C setting on the film simulation dial, and that transfers control of film simulations completely over to the menu system, essentially shutting off the film simulation dial and allowing the menu to override it. This will become important later when we talk about custom film recipes. The film simulation dial cannot, in any circumstance, store custom film recipes, and it will always default to whatever image quality settings are set in the menu system of your camera. Custom film recipes must be stored in the C1 through C4 settings on the mode dial on the right side of the camera. And we'll go over how to do this and how it all interacts a little bit more in depth later on. Right now, it's extremely important for you to understand, though, that in most modes and scenarios, the film simulation dial on the left side of the camera will override the camera's menu system and be the deciding factor in which film simulation is used. You'll know this is happening when you enter the menu system and the film simulation field is grayed out and you can't change it. This causes some problems when you're trying to set custom film recipes, because what happens is you'll select, your custom recipe on, say, C3, and if that's a Real Ace recipe, but you have, for example, Velvia selected on the film sim dial, the film sim dial will override your custom setting and mess up your photos. You won't get the look you're going for. So the way we get around that is that the film simulation dial needs to be in the C setting. That transfers control over to the menu system, allowing your custom settings or your custom recipes to control the base film simulation. So just to think of C as meaning custom, because that's what it has to be in to use your custom film recipes. The film simulation dial does have some minor customization available, but it's rather limited and not at all related to custom film recipes. To program these settings, you're going to press the menu button and navigate to page 1 of the image quality menu. You're going to scroll down and select Film Simulation Dial Setting, and from there you can set each one of the FS1, FS2, or FS3 slots to whatever factory installed film simulation that you would prefer to put in them, right? This is personal preference and whatever you want to do. The only other thing you can change is that you can set the Acros setting. Acros is a black and white film simulation to have either a standard look, or you can apply a yellow, red, or green filter to change the way your black and white photos appear. That's all there is to programming the image quality or the film simulation dial. So let's move on to talking about custom film recipes. The first thing you need to know about a custom film recipe is that you don't have to make them on your own. You're certainly welcome to do so, and a lot of people like to experiment with making their own, but there's a ton of them floating around on the internet that are really fun to experiment and play with, and I recommend doing some of that to kind of dip your toes into the water. The original and best source for these is Fuji X Weekly, which is an app for your phone and also a website. It's run by a guy named Richie Roche. I think that's how you pronounce it. Sorry if that's wrong, Richie. And he provides a bunch of recipes for free in the app, and there are more available if you subscribe for just $20 per year. Personally, I think it's well worth the cost, and I've been a subscriber since 2021, but I would like to tell you this is not a sponsored video. He has no idea I'm making this. I get nothing if you go subscribe to Fuji X Weekly. But Richie isn't the only place to get recipes. There are also some Facebook groups dedicated to sharing recipes. There's a few YouTubers out there who have made their own. The big one that comes to mind is Reggie. I think that's how you pronounce his name. And I'll drop links in the description to a few other places where you can get some custom film simulations other than Fuji X Weekly as well. Now, I also am working on making my own custom film recipe, and I plan to release that in the next month or two, so make sure you smash that subscribe button so you don't miss out on that when it happens. One final note about recipes: they're somewhat specific to each generation of camera sensor, and so if you try to program a newer recipe into an older camera, you'll find that you may not have all of the required options or settings to do so. That being said, older recipes typically can be installed on newer cameras just fine. They just sometimes won't look exactly how they would on the older cameras they were intended for. So now that you know what a custom film recipe is and where to find them, let's go over how to install them on the camera. You're going to enter the menu system and scroll all the way down to page 3 of the image quality menu, where you'll find Edit/Save Custom Setting. You're going to click on that and then choose the bank you want to install your recipe on. I'm using bank 4 for this example, and I'll be installing a recipe called Texas Sun from Fuji X Weekly. And so I click on the bank I want to use, I go to Edit/Check, and then I'm going to scroll through and set the settings all to what I want. So I like to shoot in manual mode. I like exposure compensation. This recipe calls for 2/3 of a stop or 1 stop overexposed, so I'm going to go plus 2/3 of a stop, drive mode single photo, and then we'll get into the image quality settings, which is what you find in the Fuji X Weekly recipe. And so we're just going to scroll down and change all these to match what the recipe calls for. So it calls for classic chrome for my simulation. Grain effect, it wants strong, small, so I'll select those. Color chrome effect, it calls for strong. Color chrome effect blue, it calls for weak. And then for white balance, it wants a custom Kelvin white balance of 6500. So I'm going to manually input the white balance to 6500 Kelvin. And then I'm going to add a shift that it calls for of +2 red, -6 blue, and hit OK. Dynamic range, it calls for DR200, so I'll set that up. It doesn't call for anything with derange priority, so I'm going to leave that blank. Go to tone curve, where it calls for -2 on the highlights and -0.5 on the shadow. For color, it calls for +4, so this is a very colorful simulation. And sharpness, it wants -2.
Noise reduction or high ISO noise reduction, it calls for -4. They're looking to add some grain to this for sure to make it look a little film-like. And then you're going to go down to clarity. It calls for 0. ISO, it calls for an ISO of up to 6400. Now, I like to shoot in manual, so I'll control my ISO manually. But if you wanted to, you could come over into the shooting menu and set up auto ISO in one of your auto ISO banks to have a max sensitivity of 6400, default of 160, minimum shutter speed of whatever you want it to be based on the focal length you're shooting at. I don't really like to get much under 1/160th because I have shaky hands. And so you could set up an auto ISO bank kind of like that. And that's it. Now this recipe is installed into the camera, except for I still have to save it. So this is the part where I want to go ahead and hit back to exit the edit check menu. And now don't do anything just yet. Right here, it's very important that you pay attention. You want to go down to save the changes and click save the changes and OK. Now that I've done that, my custom settings are saved in Bank 4, and I can verify that by going to check that they are what they're supposed to be, right? So it's still classic chrome. All the settings that are supposed to be here are, so I know it's correct. What you don't want to do after you come out of the menu and change all your settings is click Saved Current Settings. Never, ever hit Save Current Settings because it will erase everything you just did and apply the settings that the camera is currently set to this custom menu, which is not what you're looking to do. From this point, the last thing that you can do, which I always like to do, is to edit the custom name. And I always just make this what the name is if I'm installing a film sim, or if I made my own, I just kind of keep track, give it a test name or something. This one is called Texas Sun from Fuji X Weekly. And so I'm just going to go ahead and install the name here so that I don't forget what I've installed in the camera. And I can always reference where it came from and who to give credit to, all that kind of stuff. So now I've installed that, I'm going to back out, and it says Texas Sun. So now I have Texas Sun installed. One final important thing you need to know is that below this Edit Save Custom Setting, there is another field called Auto Update Custom Setting. And it's important that you understand this because if it's enabled, if I enable this, what happens is if I go into any settings and change them while I'm shooting with this custom recipe, the settings will be saved permanently to the recipe. If it's disabled, which is my preference, then the recipe will always return to how you had it programmed when you first add it to your camera. So anytime you come back to it, it'll be back in its base default setting. Now that's, in my opinion, the best way to do it, so that it's always kind of what you installed it to be. But not everybody agrees with this, and it's a personal preference thing, so you set this how you feel is correct. Now that you've finished adding your new recipe, all you have to do is switch your mode dial to the custom setting bank that reflects where you installed it, and it's ready to use. Once again though, you need to ensure that while using these custom recipes, your film simulation dial on the top left of the camera is set to the C setting. If it isn't, it will override the settings in your custom recipe and it won't look the way you wanted it to. Now, you guys know what goes great with custom film recipes? Camera accessories. So go check out this video I just made of my 10 favorite accessories for the X-M5, and make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on that custom film recipe I'm releasing soon. Use my light as a mic! I'm a little crazy. Babamski! It's done!